Tonight, Justin Trudeau warns Donald Trump's threat to annex Canada is very real. Behind closed doors, but with a microphone on.
Trump has it in mind that one of the easiest ways of doing that is absorbing our country. And it is a real thing.
How the acknowledgement of Trump's potential endgame could shift Canada's response. The world's richest man sets his cost-cutting sights on the Pentagon.
Elon Musk wasn't elected to any damn thing.
The fears and the pushback. Super Bowl security tightens in New Orleans.
This is the safest place to be in America right now.
They not like us. They not like us.
And the historic halftime show with potential legal consequences.
From CBC News, this is The National with Erica Johnson.
Thanks for joining us. At first, Ottawa brushed aside Donald Trump's threats to make Canada the 51st state as a joke, then as a negotiation tactic. But now, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is acknowledging the annexation threat is real. Trudeau was speaking to a summit of business leaders in Toronto when he was captured on a hot mic, suggesting that Trump's true goal isn't tariffs or border security, it's taking Canada itself, along with its strategic resources. Evan Dyer brings us that closed-door moment, some of the reaction from inside that room and beyond.
So as much as I know the media would love to stick around for the Q&A, they're not going to be able to do that.
The doors were closed, but the mic was still on.
But Mr. Trump has it in mind that one of the easiest ways of doing that is absorbing our country. And it is a real thing. In my conversation with him
The CBC News camera didn't capture all of Trudeau's remarks about annexation, but the Toronto Star captured more, and he made it clear he didn't believe the tariffs were about trade or drugs or migrants. I suggest that not only does the Trump administration know how many critical minerals we have, but that may be even why they keep talking about absorbing us and making us the 51st state, he told the room. They're very aware of our resources, of what we have, and they very much want to be able to benefit from those. Business mogul Arlene Dickinson was in the room with Trudeau as a member of his advisory council, and she says his remarks align with her own thinking.
I think my belief is very strongly, and has been, I've articulated this many times in my posts and my discussions with people, that I do believe the objective of Donald Trump is to take over our resources.
Trudeau has reportedly made similar comments privately to premiers, raising questions about how long the government has viewed this as Trump's endgame.
There can be questions to the Prime Minister and to other ministers who are involved. When did you know this was a serious thing? Did you know he wasn't joking that first time? Like, what's really been going on behind the scenes here?
What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state.
The U.S. president has been open about wanting to use economic force to annex Canada. He's threatened close ally Denmark with war if it doesn't hand over Greenland.
I don't think that sovereignty is a concept that troubles Donald Trump a whole lot. He thinks this is an artificially drawn border. And so I think just this kind of blows the doors off of everything and really kind of opens up like really strange conversations about how we will protect our sovereignty.
Canada made a show of activity at the border, trying to prove it's serious about drugs and migrants to address Trump's stated concerns.
He needed to be able to say there was a threat to the United States. That comes in the form of fentanyl and border protection. And so it is a distraction. It is something that needs to be dealt with, but it's a distraction from what he really then talks about, which is access to our resources and access to having Canada be part of, the United States.
We saw the Canadian government invite media to two events at different parts of the border to showcase its helicopter patrols. So Trudeau's strategy seems to be to give the U.S. what it says it wants on drugs, on border security, while at the same time being aware that they may just be pretexts.
And Trump's annexation threats are getting a reaction in the U.S. too.
That's right. The talk of annexing Canada and the threats to Denmark and Panama may have been a bit of a surprise at first from a president who, after all, promised to end foreign wars. But many of Trump's supporters appear to be embracing it. In fact, quite a bit of merchandise is now being sold on Amazon promoting annexation, and we have yet to see any senior member of Trump's party contradict him or ask him to stop.
Okay, thanks for this, Evan Dyer.
Thanks.
Now let's turn to CBC News chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton. So, Rosie, we know the Prime Minister has told premiers something similar to these comments this past weekend.
Yeah, that's right, Erica. But it is different, materially different, I think, when you hear it directly from the Prime Minister. We've come a long way from when the President supposedly joked about Canada becoming the 51st state over that dinner at Mar-a-Lago with Justin Trudeau before Christmas. The Prime Minister now not only acknowledging the real threat of what Donald Trump is suggesting here in terms of economic annexation, but also making the point that he believes the President is motivated by his desire to tap into this country's natural resources and critical minerals, and that it all has to be taken very seriously. Remember, Justin Trudeau had 2 phone calls with the President on Monday, and sources tell CBC News that on one of those calls, the President said he'd been reading the Treaty of 1908 that established the border between Canada and the U.S. And that really kind of clarified the thinking inside the Canadian government about all of this. Though I should also say that sources believe that that comment from the President was about destabilizing things rather than about the border itself.
Okay, so what does this tell us about the government response?
So again, the Prime Minister talked about a short-term strategy, avoid the tariffs going into place potentially at the beginning of March, and then the longer-term economic strategy to find ways for Canada to be less reliant on the United States. So whether that be tearing down interprovincial trade barriers, expanding markets, using free trade deals that we have with other countries. The Prime Minister was really trying to rally business leaders, economic leaders around some of these ideas today. But he's also heading to Europe over the weekend, where he's going to make some of these same kinds of arguments to allies.
All right, Rosemary Barton in Ottawa, thanks for this. Global Affairs Canada says it's tracking a foreign information operation targeting Liberal leadership candidate Chrystia Freeland. It says it's traced coordinated and malicious activity to the Chinese government using the app WeChat to spread articles disparaging Ms. Freeland over the past week. Freeland responded in a post on X saying, "I will not be intimidated by Chinese foreign interference. Canada's democracy is strong. My thanks to our national security agencies for protecting it." Donald Trump is plowing ahead with efforts to remake Washington with the help of the world's richest man. As Paul Hunter explains, even as Elon Musk faces greater pushback, Trump seems to be giving him even wider latitude.
And just like that, down came the lettering at the headquarters of the U.S. Agency for International Development in Washington, the decades-old federal body that oversees American foreign aid, now a key target in President Donald Trump's cost-cutting spree. Close it down, says Trump.
Shame on you!
Shame on you, shouted someone nearby. More than 10,000 employees stand to lose their jobs. Court battles to save them already underway. A judge now pausing plans to put some of the workers on paid leave. The man leading the cuts in Trump's name, Elon Musk, world's richest man, now on the cover of Time magazine, depicted as if he is now the president. Said the actual president.
Elon is doing a great job. He's finding tremendous fraud and corruption and waste.
Though Trump gave no evidence of fraud or corruption. Still, at a news conference after a meeting with Japan's Prime Minister, Trump underlined that on cuts, Musk has more to come.
But he will be looking at education pretty quickly, and he will be looking at military too.
That's right, the Pentagon, with its budget in the hundreds of billions. A federal bureaucracy, critics note, with billions in contracts with Musk's SpaceX enterprise.
Elon Musk wasn't elected to any damn thing, but to put him in charge of our government defies reality and sensibility.
But with Trump's say-so, Musk, seen here at a Trump rally on Inauguration Day, has seemingly been given free rein to cut as he sees fit, and to do so with the team he chooses, including now rehiring a staffer who quit after racist social media posts from years past were made public. Posted Musk, he will be brought back to err is human, to forgive divine.
Musk also now posting on X the following: "I love Donald Trump as much as a straight man can love another man." Erica.
Okay, well, Paul, Trump seems to have given Elon Musk and his young staffers broad access to private government data. For former President Joe Biden, he has done just the opposite?
Yeah, that's right. Trump announcing he has revoked the former president's security clearances, citing the special counsel report last year suggesting Biden has poor memory. Trump adding Biden can't be trusted with sensitive information. Biden, you may recall,
himself took away Trump's access to classified briefings almost exactly 4 years ago, in the weeks after the January 6th riots on Capitol Hill.
Thank you, Paul. Paul Hunter in Washington. Buffy Sainte-Marie's Order of Canada has been revoked. Governor General Mary Simon terminated the singer-songwriter's appointment early last month, but it only became public today. No reason was given, but the termination follows a 2023 investigation by CBC's The Fifth Estate, which raised serious doubts about Sainte-Marie's Indigenous ancestry. Crews have located the wreckage of a small plane that went missing Thursday in Alaska with 10 people on board. The aircraft was found on sea ice about 50 kilometers from its destination. All 10 people are dead. Officials say the plane lost elevation and speed before its signal was lost. Security is incredibly tight in New Orleans tonight in preparation for Sunday's Super Bowl. The extra measures put in place a month after a deadly truck attack on New Year's Day. Jamie Strachan looks at the measures and the last-minute guess that could stretch them further.
In the air and on the ground, it's hard for fans to miss the all-out security blitz around this year's big game.
Seems like tonight there's more police than there are even people, and I've never felt safer down here.
New Orleans is hosting the Super Bowl for the 11th time, but this time the security effort is drawing as much attention as the game.
I will tell you that right now we have no specific credible threats to this event.
Can we all pause for a moment of silence?
The U.S. Homeland Security Secretary was in the French Quarter visiting a memorial marking the 14 people killed on New Year's Day, victims of a brazen attack that saw a driver mow down crowds on the city's famed Bourbon Street.
Naturally, there's a question of whether we have made adjustments in our security plan in light of the events of January 1. And the answer is an unequivocal yes.
Officials say the 100,000 expected visitors will notice a difference. Massive steel barriers mark a widened security perimeter around the stadium. Things like coolers and drones prohibited.
This is the safest place to be in America right now. Oh, yes.
At the same time, state law still allows for guns to be carried without a permit.
I would say there's always a potential risk.
This expert points out that while much of the security is visible, most happens behind the scenes.
Real-time planners, organizers, managers to continually assess what's going on. They can't just sit back and go, okay, we've planned a really good event.
And if there wasn't enough to worry about, among the VIPs expected to attend, Donald Trump, a first for a current U.S. president.
Yeah, I mean, it's always cool to be able to play in front of a sitting president.
Officials insist they have it all under control. And the only story in New Orleans this weekend will be the one on the field. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
One of those VIPs, Kendrick Lamar, who will make history as the first solo rap artist to headline the halftime show. And there's a lot of speculation about whether he'll perform his Grammy-winning song that takes direct aim at Canadian rapper Drake. Eli Glasner now on whether that could have legal consequences.
They not like us. They not like us. The rap beef between Compton, LA's Kendrick Lamar and Toronto, Canada's Drake was already heating up when Lamar released Not Like Us. The rap song smashed Billboard records, inspired dance videos.
Say Drake, I hear you like I'm young.
But the song that accuses Drake without evidence of being a pedophile allegedly spawned real-world effects. A defamation lawsuit against Universal Music Group claims the song led to a drive-by shooting at Drake's Toronto home that left a security guard seriously wounded. That didn't stop Lamar from making history, with Not Like Us taking home 5 Grammys. This music journalist says Not Like Us is a once-in-a-generation song.
But still tucking in these moments that are so biting, so fierce, so visceral, and turning them into sing-along moments.
Hey, they not like. Now Lamar is set to make history again as the first solo rap artist at the Super Bowl. But with Drake's defamation lawsuit, can Lamar perform his biggest hit?
I think that all the in-house counsel, worried, stressed out lawyers like me chugging Maalox are telling the network and the NFL, for the love of God, don't run this.
This lawyer says there's a strong defense against Drake's defamation suit.
A rap battle is widely understood as a exchange of extreme insults, and that reasonable people wouldn't interpret it as being literal.
When you know we've been hurt, been down before.
As Sunday approaches, Kendrick Lamar, who received a Pulitzer Prize for writing about being black in America, says the Super Bowl show will be about one thing:
Storytelling.
Listening to that story in person will be President Trump.
All eyes will be on Kendrick to not only to see exactly what he says that can stand as a statement for this particular political moment that feels really fractured.
Say OVO, say OVO.
As fans wait to see if Lamar leans into the beef or speaks to the moment. Eli Glaster, CBC News, Toronto.
And as fans gear up for the big game Sunday, there's concern about online gambling.
We should be saying, okay, people can gamble if they want, but we are not going to push it aggressively.
Why some are calling for stricter rules next. Plus, with the threat of Trump's tariffs, should Canada be building more pipelines?
I asked the federal government to immediately approve the Energy East project.
Sam Simpson breaks down the renewed push and what's standing in the way. And later, the pilot with a message in the form of a maple leaf.
It's actually a fairly simple design to fly.
His act of patriotism in the sky. We're back into.
Is everybody okay?
Yeah.
Blustery whiteout conditions are being blamed for a massive highway pileup north of Toronto. One man died, at least 11 others were taken to hospital after the crash near Orillia, Ontario, which involved as many as 50 vehicles. Millions of football fans are expected to wager on this weekend's Super Bowl, but there is new evidence that the harms from sports betting could be greater than previously understood. As Jennifer Yoon reports, researchers warn gambling is an expanding public health threat.
Attention! These days, when sports fans tune into their favorite games, they're getting more than just the action on the field. Slick ads like this, selling apps that are effectively a casino in your pocket, open 24/7.
How many of you have seen a sports betting ad in the past month?
This group of students, athletes, and a coach say they can't escape it.
They make the games flashy.
You can't watch an entire game without seeing these ads on the court.
My friends are doing it, like underage people are doing it too.
Researchers in a top medical journal now warning governments gambling is an expanding public health threat and should be treated like alcohol or tobacco. They warn gambling can lead to depression, anxiety, domestic abuse, and even suicide.
They don't only just affect the person who gambles, they affect their loved ones, their families, their colleagues, their friends, their relationships.
This is literally about winning money.
27-year-old Theodore Oliver, who is in recovery, knows this bitterly well. His gambling didn't just cost him a fortune, it also destroyed a relationship.
It was harming the people in my life that I cared about, and I didn't have control over that as much as I thought that I could.
On paper, there are different rules put in place and enforced by the provinces, but in practice, it's kind of the Wild West. Foreign websites without licenses in Canada are still accessible here, letting Canadians make bets and making it easier for minors to skirt the rules by putting in fake birthdays.
This gambling industry spokesperson says it's on provincial governments to bring in stronger safeguards.
I think that's the best way to protect the public, is ensuring that there's regulation for this gaming.
The dynamic used to be...
But a University of Toronto psychologist suggests a different approach. Treat it like cannabis, which isn't as widely marketed.
We should be saying, okay, people can gamble if they want, but we are not going to push it aggressively. We are not going to glorify it.
As for those picking up the pieces from an addiction, they'd like to see more support, not just for themselves, but for their loved ones. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Colleges and universities across Canada are facing major cuts to programs and staff as enrollment and revenue drop. That's partly due to Ottawa's recent cap on international students. Deanna Sumanek-Johnson now with the consequences for schools and communities.
Vivian Eke has dreamt of being a 3D animator for years. So she says she was shocked to learn that her program is one of 49 being canceled by Centennial College. Eke, who's in her final year, will still be able to graduate. But as a student union rep, she's hearing from others who aren't as lucky.
It is scary because we're certain. We don't know if there's going to be any more changes in the future or if something else is going to become more drastic.
New federal caps on international student enrollments at post-secondary institutions have led to cuts in courses, programs, and staff, especially at community colleges, and especially in Ontario, home to more than 70% of international students. Just last week, St. Lawrence College announced cuts to more than 50 programs.
Emails from incoming students with a lot of disappointment that they wouldn't be able to take programs that, some applicants, I think one had mentioned they had been looking forward to a specific program since grade 9.
Programs that have high proportions of international students were most likely, but not the only ones, to be on the chopping block, says this expert.
There's some programs that had almost no international students, but were really expensive, and institutions were partially using the money from international students to subsidize those.
And it's not only students and staff who are affected. Fresh college grads tend to provide needed workforce to local communities.
St. Lawrence College serves Eastern Ontario, right? And it will hit our local communities. And that pains me because colleges are set up to serve local labor market needs.
Experts say the cuts are nowhere near done as Canada's post-secondary sector contends with a lean new reality. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
The Invictus Games are set to get underway in BC this weekend, introducing for the first time some more typically Canadian sports.
It's not about sport, it's about individual healing journeys.
The growing excitement on the slopes, next. Plus, in the face of an overdose crisis, some say a tougher approach is needed.
I prefer to call it death dealer. That's what these fentanyl dealers really are. They're death dealers.
When is drug dealing murder? And Trump's tariff threats are fueling renewed calls for more pipelines.
We have an opportunity to have a different conversation and, frankly, to strengthen our sovereignty.
Why some want a rethink on Canada's energy exports. The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are set to take part in Saturday's opening ceremony of the Invictus Games in BC. And as Yvette Brent shows us, this year, for the first time, winter sports are part of the action.
Light.
Athletes are training on the slopes, preparing to compete for the Invictus Games this weekend. This year will debut winter sports like skiing and snowboarding.
I am ski 6 days.
Ukraine's Arsen Raboshapko hit the slopes for the first time just last week.
Invictus Game для мене це ніби.
For me, Invictus Games is like a swallow of fresh air. It's a new chance and a new challenge.
So remember the pushing into the button on the left side and pushing on the right side. And then I want you to...
By day 3 on skis, this ex-soldier was doing black diamond runs, the most difficult at Whistler.
He's so passionate about skiing, and I think he'd already studied skiing before he came here, and I was so blown away by how quickly he progressed. I think he's the fastest person I've ever taught.
Invictus Games for Wounded Veterans is now more than a decade old. Founded by Prince Harry, who broke the ice last year on a skeleton sled.
The smiles on the faces that I've seen over the last few days, it proves why we do what we do.
Royal watchers say Harry and Meghan Markle are expected at the opening ceremony Saturday here in BC with Katy Perry, Nelly Furtado, and Coldplay's Chris Martin. Hundreds of competitors hailing from 23 nations will compete.
It's not about sport, it's about individual healing journeys.
3 years ago, this Ukrainian soldier's legs were shattered by bullets as Russians attacked Bakhmut. Now he's skiing mountains he once had only seen from a ship.
My first love is sea, ocean. Second love is mountain. I have second love right now.
This new sport, a fresh perspective for this vet and hundreds of others here. Yvette Brent, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now it's time to dig deeper into the stories shaping our world. Trump's tariff threats fueling fresh debates and a rethink over Canada's cross-country pipelines.
I asked the federal government to immediately approve the Energy East project.
We break down the obstacles, but first. In an overdose crisis, should drug dealers be charged with murder?
That person should be pursued and prosecuted.
Jason Proctor breaks down the calls for tougher penalties and why it's so hard to hold dealers responsible for deaths.
Thousands of victims, thousands of angry, grieving families.
I prefer to call it death dealer. That's what these fentanyl dealers really are. They're death dealers.
And for every death, the knowledge that someone sold these toxic drugs.
I've been angry for so long. I was angry for so long at that person.
So why are so few dealers held accountable for the deaths caused by the drugs they sell? And should they be charged with murder?
And if my daughter died, I would go out hunting that person down and taking their life.
Brianna Martin's story is one of heartache. She died at home last year after taking fentanyl. She was 27. And like most victims of toxic drugs, no one has been charged directly in her death.
She was just always having fun in random places.
We've come to the small city of Nanaimo to meet Brianna's boyfriend, Stephen Whitehead. He watched as she struggled with cocaine, then with heroin. In the months before she died, she overdosed repeatedly. She was even intubated. He felt powerless.
What I remember is the dog's face every single time that she overdosed. That's what I remember. That look of disappointment and sadness that the dog had and worry. And that was that was pretty hard.
Frustrated, Whitehead turned to an unlikely ally.
I don't mind that you sell it to her. Appreciate you being on top of quality and safety.
He texted Brianna's drug dealer and asked him to stop selling to her. That dealer said he'd do what he could.
I just want to get paid for what I'm owed, and I'll block Bree's number and never deal with her. Trust me, I don't want the drama or the karma on me as well.
Look at the log, I've lifted it.
But with that door closed, Brianna looked elsewhere for drugs, and another dealer filled the void. Days later, she was dead.
I realized that the more people that stopped dealing with her, the only ones that were left were going to be the ones that didn't care if they killed her.
So who sold toxic drugs to Brianna Martin, and did they know they could kill her? A search warrant obtained by CBC reveals the steps police took to try to solve that mystery. Nanaimo RCMP searched her phone, hoping to implicate someone in her death. They tracked license plates from the cul-de-sac where she bought drugs and tried to pinpoint her last dealer. In the months since we started looking into Brianna's death, we've talked to a number of the people in her life. Most importantly, her mother, who was going to sit down and talk to us, but became so despondent recently that she said she just couldn't do it. One thing she did tell me, though, is that she wants to see whoever sold the drugs that killed her daughter pay for what they've done.
For the first time in California, according to the Placer County District Attorney's Office, a judge Friday convicted a fentanyl dealer for murder.
Don't come to Placer County to sell fentanyl. You might pay for it with a life sentence.
In California, fentanyl traffickers are already paying a high price for dealing in death. In November, the state passed a new law that makes it easier to charge dealers with murder. It's called Alexandra's Law, and it's named after Alexandra Capilouto. She was Matt Capilouto's daughter.
The drug dealer ended up selling her counterfeit oxycodone pills, of which she took half of one before going to bed. And my wife found her dead in her bed the next morning. This drug dealer, or I prefer to call it death dealer, that's what these fentanyl dealers really are. They're death dealers.
The man who sold Alexandra the drugs got 9 years for drug trafficking, not murder. But Capilouto knew who he was long before the law caught him. Did you want to sort of confront him, or what? How do you...
I had to constrain myself because, yeah, we were able to identify who this man was semi-early on. I knew where he lived, and I just had to trust that the right outcome would eventually happen, and fortunately, it did happen. But to answer your question, that was for a dad, that was a challenging time.
My family was one of the lucky ones who did find a semblance of justice.
Capilouto channeled that anger into action. He fought for years to make Alexandra's law a reality. It gives dealers a last chance warning.
So what Alexandra's law is, it's an admonishment that would be given to anybody convicted of a drug offense, making them aware of the dangers of those drugs, and that if they continue in this activity and someone dies as a result of drugs that they supply, they can be held accountable for murder.
In the United States, murder convictions for fentanyl dealers have made headlines. In Canada, the toughest charge they're likely to face is manslaughter, but even that is rare.
It seems to the average individual that you sell something to somebody that you know might kill them, you committed a murder. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's difficult for some people to understand what's required in an investigation.
Cash Heed gets the drive behind Alexandra's law. He's BC's former top cop and was the head of Vancouver's drug squad.
I have a young daughter. She's 17 years old. If someone sold her something that caused harm to her, I would want to seek vengeance against that individual, and if my daughter died, I would go out hunting that person down and taking their life. In all honesty, that's exactly what I would do.
Heed has long pushed for Canadian police to go after drug dealers, not users.
What do you think about that idea of charging somebody with murder if they've knowingly sold a drug to somebody that can and has killed them?
If they knowingly, and that's what we really have to face here. Absolutely, in my opinion, that person should be pursued and prosecuted.
So how often does that happen, this methodical going after that individual?
Seldom.
But Heed cautions that prosecution is just part of a crisis that's driven by endless demand.
In the course of your career, you must have spoken to drug dealers who have sold, drugs that have killed people. What do they think?
They tell me that there's so much money to be made. If they're not doing it, someone else is going to be making that money.
The market for drugs is bottomless. That was on display even during our short visit to Nanaimo. We saw a coroner called to another death from toxic drugs, one of nearly 100 in this small city last year.
You've had experiences with overdoses. Like, how many have you had?
28.
28?
We met 26-year-old Bruce Brown in downtown Nanaimo. He's been using drugs since he was a teenager. He writes his name on his hand in case a paramedic or coroner needs it.
The people that are selling fentanyl, do you think they think about the possibility it could kill someone like you?
No, I think the only thing that's on their mind is money.
Brown says many dealers are users themselves, and he doesn't think charging them with murder will make any difference.
Will it stop fentanyl from being on the streets or the selling of drugs?
I'm not too sure, but no, I don't think so.
Stephen Whitehead has spent the past year thinking about what should happen to whoever sold toxic drugs to Brianna Martin.
If they do find them and then send them to jail, it's just like it would almost be kind of like a hollow victory, because another person would just take their place and then another Brianna would die. Like, do I want revenge or do I want solutions at this point? Like, I've been angry for so long. I was angry for so long at that person.
Last month, police charged 2 men with drug trafficking offenses in Nanaimo, BC. Investigators told Jason that Brianna Martin's death was part of that investigation. Coming up, bracing against possible U.S. tariffs, Canada is looking to future-proof its energy exports.
We can do this, but it's going to take an awful lot of people rowing in the same direction at the same time.
Are more pipelines the answer? We'll break that down next. As Canadian leaders hunt for solutions to those looming U.S. tariff threats, long-dead pipeline projects are back in the spotlight.
Right now, much of Ontario and Quebec get their oil from a pipeline that runs from Canada into the United States and back up to Canada.
Sam Sampson looks at the renewed controversial push for pipelines as a way to protect Canadian sovereignty and the economy.
Why wouldn't we be talking about how providing energy security to our friends in Ontario and Quebec and Atlantic Canada by having our own pipeline built?
Renewed calls for pipelines are echoing across Canada because of Trump.
I asked the federal government to immediately approve the Energy East project.
Canadian politicians want to protect the country's economic interests ahead of Trump's proposed tariffs, including a 10% tax on energy resources. That would seriously impact Canada's biggest export moneymaker, crude oil. The United States is Canada's biggest customer for oil by far, and most of it comes from Alberta. The landlocked province uses a vast network of pipelines to get its energy resources to refineries and ports across Canada and the U.S. Most of them go through or directly to the States, a country that gets more than half its oil from Canada.
Canada is so reliant on the U.S., even if we got a 10% tariff, we'd still have no choice but to continue to sell to them, unless there were other options.
Now we have an opportunity to have a different conversation and frankly to strengthen our sovereignty.
She's talking pipelines. There are two previously canned plans that keep coming up again now, Energy East and Northern Gateway. The idea is to get Alberta oil directly to the east and west coasts, then sell it at home and export it around the world. The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, for example, does just that. Currently sending about 600,000 barrels of oil a day directly from Edmonton to West Coast ports. Some still goes to the U.S., but some is sold to Asian markets.
You know, the world is our oyster.
Former Alberta Premier Rachel Notley is on the Prime Minister's Canada-U.S. Relations Council.
Oh, they are so tired of hearing about it from me.
What is the reaction, though, honestly?
Well, there's a lot of head nods. People understand that, this is a frustrating situation that we're in. I think, some folks are wondering, oh, is this really doable?
Is it? Northern Gateway, Energy East, and other pipeline projects were called down for a lot of reasons. Some include a lack of federal government support, pushback from Quebec and Ontario, and environmental concerns. So it's been a challenge to get everybody on board. Would that change now?
In the aftermath of what has happened, we do need to reflect a little bit. Right now, much of Ontario and Quebec get their oil from a pipeline that runs from Canada into the United States and back up to Canada.
What Mr. Trump is doing may change the situation in the future. So if there's a social acceptability, we will be open to these kind of projects.
Do you think people will be changing their minds now that we might be facing a trade war?
I think so, yes. If I look at my social media feeds and this united front against the tariffs, that gives me some hope that we can and will work together more closely on solving problems like this. There's definitely
Energy advisor Karina Bryson, with 30 years of oil industry experience, says it's all about impact.
If you start having lines at gas stations and shortages and things like that, they might decide that security of supply is more important to them than some of the reasons they were opposing those pipelines in the first place.
Some of the most visible calls against pipelines in Canada come from First Nations communities. But when Trump's recent tariff threats surfaced, at least one leader seemed to waver.
We are staring into the abyss of uncertainty, the climate crisis and the American threat. So I would suggest that if we don't build that kind of infrastructure, Trump will.
What did you mean when you said, if we don't build this type of infrastructure, Trump will?
Everybody steps in it once in a while. And I think I kind of stepped in it there. But we've since clarified our position.
Would you support a new pipeline through British Columbia?
No, absolutely not. The reason is abundantly clear in regard to the destructive impacts of the intensifying climate crisis. Our history is written on the land itself. So we're very dependent on what happens to the land.
Potentially, the biggest hurdle is who would pay for these pipelines.
The companies that were involved in those canceled pipelines tell CBC they have no interest in restarting them.
Any new company would have to start the regulatory process from scratch. Now, some suggest if no private companies step in, the federal government could, like it did with the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. But again, would it?
Building on the Team Canada approach, if as a nation we decide we want to do this, we can do this. But it's going to take an awful lot of people rowing in the same direction at the same time for a sustained period. It's a long time since we've done that as Canada.
So we heard from Energy and Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson in that piece. He also noted that this reflection doesn't necessarily mean Ottawa would immediately approve a new pipeline. The federal government would still have a duty to consult with affected communities. Now to a Canadian broadcast exclusive. Pia Chattopadhyay, host of CBC Radio's The Sunday Magazine, spoke with American billionaire philanthropist Bill Gates about his new memoir, Source Code: My Beginnings.
Tell me some more about your family dynamics. What was going on inside the Gates home in your childhood?
Well, my mom was the, hyper energetic person who was orchestrating all the family activities, and she had a certain set of expectations. But she and I, for a while, were, in pretty strong conflict. That my dad would come home and, in his calm way, try to help out there, and that's where I ended up. They had me see an analyst, psychologist, who talked to me about, okay, he was nice about, giving me various tests and things, and then saying to me the idea of being in conflict with my parents, didn't seem to have a purpose, and in a way it wasn't even fair.
The other great concern right now is the increasing power of tech and tech leaders in politics, whether it is tech aggressively fighting regulation, Elon Musk's role in the next Trump administration. So where do you see that line between tech playing politics, because it can, and the damaging effects it can have on a democracy?
Well, hopefully democracy, has the ability to not let any single industry or group of leaders be overly influential. As a tech leader, you should engage with politicians because you can see how things like AI are going to advance. But, in no way does the tech industry understand exactly how its products may end up getting used. And so you really want the politicians to be very educated and think ahead, particularly with the AI work that's going on right now.
You can hear Pia's full interview with Bill Gates this weekend on CBC Radio's The Sunday Magazine or anywhere you get your podcast. Up next, a symbol of unity drawn in the sky.
I just wanted to show that we don't like to be pushed around and that we're all proud Canadians.
The patriotic pilot with a message for the U.S. in our moment. You're looking at a maple leaf, but not where you might expect it, seen here on a flight tracker over parts of southwestern Ontario. Amid all the back and forth recently with our neighbors down south, one pilot took to the skies to draw out the Canadian symbol. And tonight, his aerial artwork makes our moment.
I've been thinking about doing this for a little while. It looked like a good day, so I went up and flew the maple leaf. It's actually a fairly simple design to fly. It's just got points and straight lines. So I was able to draw it out and upload it into my airplane and be able to fly it. So it worked out okay. I took off from the London airport, and my first point on the leaf, I chose the intersection of Highway 402 and 401. Started from there and just went around down towards Rondo and up towards Sarnia and back around, about 2 hours. There's no autopilot, so I was hand flying the whole time. I don't really have a flag in front of my house or on my car or anything like that. And I sort of feel a little patriotic with what's sort of going on lately. I'm not real happy with, what is happening back and forth across the border right now. It's kind of sad. I just wanted to show that we don't like to be pushed around and that we're all proud Canadians.
Apparently, it took 2 hours and 3 minutes to accomplish. He flew 426 kilometers. And when he came down from the sky, he was greeted at his local flight training center by people who had noticed his design on flight trackers. And they thought the creation was fantastic. It is certainly something to spot and so accurate, just hand-drawn, so to speak. Very impressive. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Erica Johnson in Vancouver. Take care.